I would ship to production and it would work. And that would surprise me. Why am I surprised by this? This is how it should be. This is how it was when I was building software back in the olden days. You shipped it and it worked.
Hello and welcome to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. I'm Noel, and today I'm joined by Peter Pistorious, CEO of RedwoodJS, here to talk about Redwood SDK. In this episode, Peter and I talk about the history of RedwoodJS, the transition to the Redwood SDK, why the team decided to go all in on Cloudflare, and the etymology of durable objects. So here's the episode with Peter. How's it going, Peter?
It's going really great.
Maybe just to start with, for people that aren't really in the ecosystem, can you give us just the brief history of where RedwoodJS kind of fits in the framework, meta framework kind of spectrum, that ecosystem?
Sure. So there are actually two versions of RedwoodJS which are confusing. There's the original framework that we built 5 years ago, and we've renamed that to RedwoodJS GraphQL. That's a website and an API side that you can host on a serverless infrastructure. And now we've pivoted to a new project called RedwoodSDK. RedwoodSDK is a React framework for Cloudflare. And it gives you React Server components, Vite, real-time capabilities, and an amazing exposure to Cloudflare's developer platform.
Yeah, and an excellent marketing website. Your guys' marketing website for the SDK is amazing. It was the vibe is so good.
Thank you. Yeah. We actually had we do this thing called This Week in Redwood, where we kind of share what we're trying to do with the framework. And someone came through this week and they said, "Hey, your brand is really cringe." I'm over 40 and I know what you're talking about, but I don't think it resonates with anyone under 40. Mm-hmm. So we took a poll and we asked the internet or people on X whether we were cringe, and 28.2% said that we are cringe. So I'm going to bet against those odds. I think if we can at least stir some sort of emotion in you, be it cringe or not, then that's probably better than nothing. And, I love The Office, and that show is just about cringe. So maybe we're onto something.
But yeah, and I feel like there's different kinds. There's cringe and there's self-aware cringe. When I hit the website, I was very much oh yeah, this is exactly the vibe I want. Maybe it won't resonate with everyone, but I feel like everyone will remember it if nothing else. So
totally, we're trying to bring back this feeling of being able to ship software on your own and just build stuff that excites you.
Yeah, that's as good a segue as any. So tell me, what kind of motivated this? I don't want to use the term branch, but kind of this shift in approach to how you this is used by the end user, the developer. What was the motivation to kind of to break these out into the GraphQL and the SDK piece?
The GraphQL framework didn't really grow as well as we thought it would. So we decided to take another shot at what we were building. Mm-hmm. And I had some ideas around what I wanted to see out in the world. With AI agents and these generative coding tools, you kind of get the sense that building software or writing software is actually not that difficult anymore. And I don't mean difficult in terms of the thought processes that go into it, but I mean difficult in terms of the emotional energy that you have to put into writing software. There are things that I really dislike, building forms, building auth solutions and things like that. And I can get AI to build that for me. So I can stay in flow for longer and just build software. But the part where it does start to get really difficult is when I want to host that thing that I've built. It's the part that takes me out of flow. The moment when I want to release it to production, my expectation is that it doesn't work, that I have to kind of put these secrets into the environment and connect the services, and it just feels disjointed from what I'm actually trying to achieve. So I set out with those two things in mind. The first being that software is going to be written by a lot of software is going to be written by AI, and the second part being that I want a developer platform. So we went and searched around for something, and we found Cloudflare.
Why do you think that the kind of tighter coupling to a specific hosting infrastructure is the way that these kind of frameworks, meta frameworks, like these tools that are trying to give devs as much as they can off the shelf, right? Why do those inherently need to be tied to a specific hosting provider?
So actually, I really like that question about why Cloudflare. But I'll answer this one, and then we can maybe go back to
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one.
I'll roll back to that one later. I think this is like a kind of an interesting conceptual exploration first. Yeah.
So, what I think about when it comes to software development, you're trying to share memory in a safe way from one machine to another machine to another machine. As an example, if you query a database, you do that on your server, and then you pass that down to the browser using some sort of API. We're passing
Mm-hmm.
memory from those three machines down to the one in a safe way. The tighter and closer those couplings are, the easier it becomes. The more standards orientated they are, the easier it becomes. So with Cloudflare, it feels as if your database, your storage, your queues are all on the same machine
Mm-hmm.
because they have this amazing way to bind them to the worker, where you
Mm-hmm.
have direct access to the resource that you or the service that you're trying to access. So it feels like magic, and you're just in many cases just using fetch in order
Yeah.
to like upload a file. You can take a fetch request, push it up to the server. You can stream that directly into R2, which is Cloudflare's version of storage,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like 10 lines of code. It feels really intuitive.
Do you think that kind of this encapsulates both of those questions I'm teasing at here a little bit? Like, why is it necessary for the hosting provider to kind of expose these primitives for something like the Redwood SDK to be viable versus something in this slice of the stack? Like, why can the Redwood SDK, again, just as an example, not do this abstraction layer for us? Like, why, as a developer, does my meta framework need to be tied to a specific kind of hosting provider? Because I think we're seeing this pattern across the board, right? Like this is happening with the frameworks. But I'm curious, like in your words, why is that a necessary kind of tight coupling to make that really work versus the frameworks being able to abstract that away so the devs are a little bit more agnostic?
So with Redwood GraphQL, we actually provided a layer. We provided a lot of integrations to a lot of different services.
Mm.
And I think we had something like 28 authentication services at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it became very, very difficult to maintain those.
Yeah.
And it actually took our focus away from what we were trying to achieve. So we ended up integrating VC funded businesses into our framework that made it bloated and made it harder to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it really translated into something that benefited the end user, the developer themselves, unless they picked one of those solutions. So,
Mm.
how I like
Yeah.
to think about it is when you want to use an external service, you
Mm-hmm.
pay, I'm going to say 5 taxes. So, say for instance, you want a database. First
Mm-hmm.
off, you have to figure out what database you want. So, you go and search the internet, you find the branding uh, and the pricing and the performance to your liking. Then you have to create an account. That's tax number 1. Then
Mm-hmm.
you have to give them your credit card. That's tax number 2. Tax number 3 is you have to figure out their API. Tax number 4, you have to make it work locally. Tax number
Mm-hmm.
5, you have to make it work in production. And if you're lucky, you'll get a staging environment.
Right.
So
Right.
you're paying like a lot just to use a
Mm-hmm.
database. And if that stuff is part of the platform that you've chosen, it's there automatically, and it really makes software more what's the word I'm looking for? Stable,
Yeah.
and it makes shipping feel like magic. And one of the things that I would ship to production, and it would work. And that would surprise me. Every single time I did it, it just worked. No matter when I was like, if I introduced a new binding or a new service, it just worked.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a while, I got surprised that I was surprised. I was like, why am I surprised by this? This is how it should be. This is how it was when I was building software back in the olden days. You shipped it and it worked. And I think it's because of the complexity of integrating services. They're not part of we want you to focus on the software you want to build rather than the structure that it runs on. That stuff is not what you should be focusing on. You should be writing code.
Do you think the fact that it's necessary to kind of like that these frameworks, people operating at this layer that you guys are operating at, do you think the fact that it is necessary to do this is a little bit of kind of a failure in standards being developed that kind of make this easier, like it necessitates this tight coupling that we're talking about? Or do you think that this is just kind of an inevitability as the ecosystem evolves and stuff? Like it makes sense that the primitives which these hosting providers are offering are going to change, so the way in which we're interacting is going to be too dynamic. or do you ever think we'll be in a realm where there is like some kind of standardization that makes this level or this level of convenience kind of more ubiquitous?
I think, maybe MCP servers are something that could resolve this down the line, but then you still need to figure out whether the offering that the agent is surfacing to you makes a lot of sense for your needs.
Yeah.
And it's a really great question. I think it could be solved. Whether it will be, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of motivations and factors in play. I'll like reel us in a little bit here from the abstract. We can talk about some actual like cool capabilities that have been empowered by you guys making this specific decision. We talked a little bit about kind of the beauty of the Cloudflare worker abstraction and the way in which you can kind of interact with compute and data and all that stuff. Was there anything in particular that led to this kind of beautiful developer experience you're talking about where things just worked? Like why do you think that in particular manifest out of your guys' Cloudflare choice?
So I'll tell you how we actually ended up picking Cloudflare. I live in South Africa, sort of at the bottom of Africa. So I'm pretty much far from everything. And when I write software, I would love it to be fast for people near me. I want them to have the performance that they get from international experiences. And then number two, I live in a community where there are a lot of people that just don't have credit cards. And I remember what it was like being a 20-year-old or a 16-year-old wanting to enter the conversation, build software and ship software. So when we were out there searching for a platform, there were two things that we needed. Number one, it had to be everywhere in the world. And number two, you had to be able to use it without a credit card. And Cloudflare does both of those. So we spent a month actually building a React Server component implementation with Vite and Cloudflare workers. And we were blown away by what we could achieve. The fact that they had a database and queues and storage all available locally meant that the developer experience locally also matched production. And it just felt so good. Like I kept looking for the downsides. When it comes to technology, you're usually enthusiastic about it, but eventually you figure out what the trade-offs are. And when it comes to Cloudflare, I haven't really found them yet. And it's surprising for me. Why do I think Cloudflare has built such a great system? I think my understanding is that they're actually a networking company with really solid engineers. And they're entering the space trying to compete with AWS. And they've built something really, really solid.
I think that I share my intuition is probably similar there, and that like I think that their approach of coming at this from the other direction of like we're going to be a networking company, we're going to solve all these problems, and then like kind of backing their way into these hosting provider services has lined up really well with a lot of the evolution that's been happening with front end development and frameworks and the current push that we're seeing. And I think that the primitives that made sense for them to offer, there was just such kind of implicit harmony. It just jived so well. And I think like I've had a similar experience where it's like the Cloudflare paradigm. It's like, what are we even going to miss out on here by choosing to go this route? It's like, yeah, I haven't really been burned too bad. Totally. I'm knocking on wood here. Yeah, but I've had a similar experience. I guess maybe to zoom out just a little bit, just to give devs a little bit more context. How, when they're using the Redwood SDK, how much of a membrane is there between the Cloudflare services versus am I developing thinking about Redwood, or am I still kind of thinking about the underlying Cloudflare infrastructure?
So one of the other lessons that we learned when we built Redwood GraphQL was that we wanted to make sure that nothing was hidden from you. I wanted to build a framework that had zero magic, that only used TypeScript, and that allowed you to follow the request and response model in every line in the code. So when you're building using Redwood SDK, what you get is a Vite plugin. That Vite plugin gives you access to workerd, which is Cloudflare's JavaScript runtime. And then you get React Server components, server-side rendering. And then on top of that, we've built a router. The router allows you to handle routing and then also return pages or responses. Everything we've built is web standard. We don't have any magic exports. And what I mean by that, there isn't like a special export that you do in a file that is somehow hooked up magically that gives you like a loading indicator or an error boundary or something like that. You have to be explicit in your code. And our APIs feel really intuitive. It feels like you're actually building on the primitive of what the web was meant to be built upon. So that Vite plugin, just rolling back a
Yep.
little bit, that
Yeah,
Vite
yeah,
plugin
perfect.
also gives you access to something called MiniFlare. MiniFlare is Cloudflare's emulation environment, and that gives
Mm,
you database and queues and even AI. What happens with AI is they actually link it to your Cloudflare account and then it runs in the cloud because you can't run them locally, but it
mhm.
feels like you're running them locally. It's really a fantastic experience.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. Do you think so? So Cloudflare, I hope this doesn't sound like 2 points of question, but Cloudflare has a couple different ways that if you go look at their docs, it's like, here's how you develop a React app on Cloudflare. You can talk about deploying a React app and the capacity to use server components and all of those things. But it is a little bit trickier to stitch together, like, okay, how do I set up my development environment and how do I deploy this and all that stuff. So do you think that's the main benefit of using Redwood SDK? I guess, like, is there like that router, I think, is also unique to you guys, but is the developer experience the pain point that you guys are trying to target there, or is there some other technical piece that Redwood SDK solves uniquely?
So we actually have this ability to upgrade the request and response model to real time to WebSockets.
Oh,
So
cool.
what we've done there is we've given you access to durable objects when
Hmm.
you initialize the client. And that means that if you perform a server action, a React server action, the state lives in the server. We can tell when two clients are connected to the same key, and we can ship the RSC payload to those clients and update the screen. So
Oh, cool.
what we're doing is taking React, taking TypeScript and Cloudflare, and we're binding those together as something that feels cohesive and
Hmm.
well thought out, but based on web standards, where you can control every byte over the wire. I don't
Yeah.
think there's a framework that does that. Frameworks usually try to abstract away the complexity, and we're
Hmm.
saying, here it is. Think about the request response model
Yeah.
and go for it. And
Hmm.
it makes things make sense. We also have this idea that if you can reason about it, then it's very likely that an AI can reason about it better. So if
Hmm.
you're using agents to code, then we are also trying to be helpful there. We give them rules, and we're also building MCP servers to generate your code for you. But we're trying to be helpful here. No, I'm not going to. I'm not, I want to say something spicy, but I'm not going to share it.
No, no, that's fine. No sweat. It'll eat at me the rest of the day, but that's fine.
No, okay,
So
I'll
the
share it, and
yeah,
you can
let's hear it.
decide whether you can put it in or not. So one of the
Yeah.
things that I think about quite often is there's a lot of people who are trying to learn how to build software. So they go and pick a framework that's backed by a massive corporation that has hundreds of millions of dollars in funding,
Hmm.
and you're spending your one finite resource, your time, to learn something so that you can pay some giant SaaS corporation $20 a month at the end of the day.
Hmm. Yeah.
What we were giving you is a framework that is fundamentally based on web technology, and you can translate that into any other framework. So
Mm.
that's my hot take. Don't
Yeah.
waste your
Yeah.
time learning a big corporate's tools.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there are options on there which are not tied to things, but I think we are not tied to these big for profit corporate entities that are very entrenched and they've built their moat. But yeah, it still doesn't feel like we're at the point where at least maybe devs set out and they want to learn one of those, but I don't think we're at the point where that's the thing. It's not the kind of, it's not the norm for what companies are using, what people are looking for. So I'm always, excited to hear about people thinking about using the web primitives to make those kind of the building blocks and offering those up to devs to stay a little bit more open. You mentioned durable objects and this kind of streaming paradigm, making that a little bit easier. I think durable objects are very cool and probably underutilized right now. I don't think there's a lot of people using those. When you guys set out and were kind of looking to expose some of that functionality, did you feel that they were a little bit too tricky to interact with naively if you're just coming in, and there would be a lot of utility there for devs if that were made a little bit simpler? Or was that just kind of the obvious choice for this abstraction?
I think that durable objects probably have the worst name in the Cloudflare
Agreed.
offering.
Yep.
I still don't exactly know what a durable object is. I should go check up on that. But really, we
Yeah.
had someone on the inside at Cloudflare helping us out, which was Sunil. We knew that we needed sessions. So he said, hey, do that on a durable object. A durable object can exist just for one single user.
Mm-hmm.
and that durable object can be hosted closer to them, whereas your
Mm-hmm.
worker can be hosted closer to the database, and that
Mm-hmm.
overall reduces latency. And that's something that Cloudflare can figure out for you. And then when it came to real time, we knew that WebSockets were the way to go, and
Mm-hmm.
durable objects are WebSocket native, and
Yep.
they can scale infinitely. So you can
Mm-hmm.
have, I'm going to say, hundreds of thousands of users on your platform, on your website, and
Yep.
it's still going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt like an incredibly natural choice just to use those.
Yeah.
I did not find them difficult to reason about, but maybe this is in hindsight now that I've worked with them quite a bit. They are a little bit strange.
Yeah, I don't think that they're too conceptually. Well, maybe yeah. I think that they're so unique, right? They're solving a problem that I feel is not easily surfaced. And you realize once you have it, you're like, I need this abstract thing that's tied to a specific user or session, but I want to put it somewhere out of the browser, right? Like I don't know where this abstraction needs to live. And wrapping that up, giving you a fast way to communicate with it and all that stuff is cool. I kind of don't want to have to think about it all the time. It's cool if I just have a browser API and it all works.
Well,
Like,
that's actually a
yeah,
really nice way to put it. I like
yeah, I
that.
agree. Yeah, I agree. And I think that maybe is why the name durable objects was chosen, but I don't want to try to read too deeply into that because I haven't done any research either. But yeah, like you mentioned, like the streaming overall, like or streaming at large, is that on top of what you guys are doing with durable objects, or is there another kind of request response streaming component?
Response has the ability to actually stream over the wire. There's a flag. You say stream is true, and then you push that out to the browser, and the browser will read it in chunks. So we surface that in two ways. Once you set it as a response, you can just make the fetch handler in the browser deal with that. But you can also do it for Rack server components. So
Mm,
a good example is if you're chatting to an AI agent or an LLM,
yeah.
the response that it returns is often, it's not the whole thing at once. It happens over time. And you can either show like a giant loading indicator for your user in the browser, or you can stream it word for word down to the user. So
Mm-hmm.
we've included functionality that allows you to take that stream and then pass it back down through the Rack server component and update the state in your client components
Mm-hmm.
so that you can see like every single word coming in and you get that responsiveness that you want. So we've taken these like the web API's ability to stream and we've made it feel native to React.
Yeah. Cool. Had you seen any other kind of meta frameworks on top of React or anything that were providing that kind of native handling, that abstraction as well? Or was this largely just kind of an internal idea that you guys had?
I try not to compare what we're doing too much to other frameworks, but I didn't see this anywhere else. It seems intuitive to me. Like if you're focusing on the request response stuff and the capabilities of the browser, then you're like, oh, yeah, of course we can do this. But we wanted to make sure that you understood that it can do it because we understand it because we're building the framework.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Are there any potential kind of traps, foot guns that one can find themselves in if they're in this world where you're kind of like using streaming, but you're in the React world, so you've already got like hooks and stuff firing, like potentially? Is there any potential tricky edge cases there that you guys have seen users run into or have tried to proactively solve?
Yeah. The one of the largest things is that people tend to forget when they're using a client component or a server component or how to pass them around. And it's something that we haven't solved yet. The errors are kind of obtuse.
It sounds tricky,
Um,
yeah.
and it's one of the things that we'd really love to say, hey, like you actually can't do this. There's a rule here.
Hmm.
We'll fix it. But that's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah. And I feel like those are also those tricky things. As soon as you put the rule into place, like that probably solves it for some set, but then there's a set of developers that are confused as to why the rule is there enforcing the thing. And it's like maybe you can use it as a learning experience. But yeah, those are always the tricky questions, right? Where you're like kind of you're in this realm of having opinions based on what like the constraints of the framework's platform. And it's like one has to kind of open the hood to understand why you can or cannot do something. Um,
Totally.
and I think that is always tricky. Um, let's see. I think this is kind of the last line of questioning I want to get into before we move to some quick round questions. But you mentioned kind of exposing things to ease AI development, like using AI to help code. Like, what does that look like? I feel like for most devs, they're like AI development is like using Copilot in browser or maybe some tools off the shelf to give them like a CSS and kind of HTML component scaffolding. What does that look like, SDK?
So we ship something called, we actually use a third-party package called Vibe Rules. And what this does is it figures out what editors you have on your computer. You install packages, and then it takes our rules for the LLM and injects them into the right folder. It's also versioned, so if we update our rules, you'll get new rules. In addition to that, we also have experimented with an MCP server. A good example of that is if you go to an agent in your cursor editor and you say, hey, create a new page for me that lives at the route / it's quite possible that the LLM will be able to do that for you. I've seen it do it for me, but sometimes it gets it wrong. That's when our MCP server comes in play, and it says, I know exactly how to do this. Give me the wheel, and then it generates it using tsmorph and modifies your code directly. The response is also crazy fast, and it doesn't take a lot of credits. And we know that that is exactly what we should be doing. The agent just needs to call our tool. Yeah. So that's how we're trying to be super helpful, like directly helpful. But thirdly, we also think that the choices that we've made, building upon web APIs, building upon just React and TypeScript, and not putting any weird files in weird places so you don't actually know what's going on, we think that choice gives you a really good foundation because your editor can understand it. I'm hoping that turns out to be correct.
Yeah. It's cool to see this, just kind of see this class of tools where one can more easily instruct the agent to interact with whatever abstraction that may be in a given context to add code more easily. Because I think that is the big problem right now, is getting the correct delivered to whatever model you're trying to invoke dynamically. And like, we're all over the place still, just kind of as an industry, there's no standard. Like all industries have this problem. It'll get solved in the engineering land first because it's engineers that are trying to solve this problem for themselves. And then once this paradigm is figured out.
So, even despite the fact that we provided these rules to our editor, it would still think that we're on the older version of Redwood. So we actually had to do something drastic. We had to rename our packages to RWSDK instead of it being at RedwoodJS /SDK, because we don't want the LLM to know about the previous one. They're a little bit backdated and they haven't figured out this new version yet.
Sponge everything from them either. Like you kind of just have to tell them it's a new thing. Yeah.
That's I tried everything. I even, I was like, never do this. If you do this, you'll go to jail. I tried everything. It just didn't work.
I feel like, it's like in either direction, working with LLMs and like saying, no, it has to be this, or no, you cannot do this. Once you're in that kind of mode of decision, like once you've found the path that it's going to follow for a given prompt, it's pretty hard to force it not to at least tend that way. Yeah.
Feels like an incredibly circular argument. And, one of the things that I just want to mention is that my brother is a technical person. He's wanted to code his whole life. And like 2 months ago, he came to me and he said, hey man, look at this thing I built. And I opened up the website and there was this pretty decent page that had animations and like a form and all kinds of stuff on it. And he was like, I built this. And I was like, how did you do this? And he said, well, I used Cursor. And I said, where's it hosted? He's like, it's on Vercel. And I was like, what database are you using? He said, Neon. And I was like, why did you make those choices? He said, I didn't. It just happened. And he said, I spent so much time just trying to get this online. And he's like, the coding part was easier, had it working locally, but trying to get it into production, that was the biggest pain for me. And then he was like, I also have to pay them $20 a month. Like I pay Vercel $20 a month. And I was like, okay, so I'm glad that there's a tool. I'm glad that Redwood SDK exists for people that are trying to enter the programming world so that they can just scratch an itch and solve a problem without necessarily having to learn about other people's products.
Nice. Yeah, I had one more question on my kind of core outline here, and that is concerning the future of development in general and what kind of impact you're hoping Redwood has. Like, I think that's an interesting story because I think the problem is often for people coming in, it's just so hard for them not to end up treading the most trodden path, right? Like either the LLMs tend to do it because it's the thing that's recommended, there's the most documentation on it, or they just Google it. The top Reddit response says, learn React and deploy on Vercel because it's the most industry standard thing or whatever. How do you think that, from your perspective, what's the path to break that mold a little bit to try to get these tools into the hands of devs that are just starting out so it's in their view when they're on this initial journey?
So I think we're going to try two things. The first one is our messaging around personal software. We're trying to reach those people through building a framework that speaks directly to them. So we kind of have this messaging around you don't have to build something that's profitable. You just have to scratch an itch. And there's nothing wrong with making money, but in the early stages, just focus on learning and building and shipping. And the second thing that we're thinking of is creating a store for software, for source code. So, how to think about this is maybe I've built something useful. I don't necessarily want to build a brand or a pricing strategy or even do customer support because I just wrote the thing, I scratched an itch. So you can take this piece of code, you can put it onto the Redwood SDK store, and then you can sell it for $5. You can sell a license for like a year. I get the code. I'm the customer. I get the code. I can modify it for my own needs, and I can put it in. I can put it on my own Cloudflare. I can host it myself. So that's how we're thinking about monetizing Redwood SDK, but also kind of changing the mindset of the industry that there's a middle ground. You don't just have to give it away for free. And open source is amazing, and you don't have to create like an enterprise grade charting library.
Yeah.
You can just charge $100 for something. If it's helpful, I'm pretty sure someone will pay for that, and it shortcuts their experience, and they get the code so they can modify it for their own needs. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about saying there is an alternative. You can make money just writing code. Let's see how that works out.
Yeah, that's cool. I have a couple projects. Neither of them are technically like front end project. They're not like React projects, but they're in the similar vein where it's open source. I run like a hosted version of it, and then I like charge a very, very light fee to cover my own hosting costs for people that are using it and to help prevent abuse. But I often get questions. They're like, hey, I want to host this myself. How do I do it? And they're like brand new people coming into this. And I'm like, I want to empower you to host it. I've tried to make it as easy as possible. But the people that are asking these questions just have like, no, they don't even know where to start, which is fine, right? It's like, well, you can either deploy the containers and like, run wherever you can deploy containers, you can run the containerized version, or you can just spin up a server somewhere and run it, like hop in and spin it up. And it's like, it would be super cool if I could just like find a way to give them a button to click that's like, okay, like here, copy this, and it'll be charged to your account and whatever, like Cloudflare, you name it, and it'll just run.
That is 100% the idea. And a lot of people that I've spoken to have the same feelings. They're like, this thing's useful. I want to share it with people, but I don't know how. I don't want to charge them for the service. I just want to give them the utility.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this kind of paradigm of like micro software that one can self-run, because I think an interesting one that we probably haven't been thinking about as an industry in a while. But I think it'll be cool to see if that kind of evolves at all. I feel like the closest we ever got to this conversation was in the smart contract space. Everybody was talking about this stuff, but it's kind of tied up in this whole other thing that makes it really tricky. There's a lot of barriers to entry there to even get Hello World off the ground, right? And
I was a PHP developer a long time ago, and then it was sort of just bare metal. And I actually ended up buying some source code from a person who sold this piece of software that read your htaccess logs and then gave you like a really nice UI around who was visiting your site, how long they've stayed there. And I think it was like $20, and I hosted it myself. I think it was called Mint, actually. But, it did work back then, and I think it can work now, especially if you can just one-click install it on your own Cloudflare account. Maybe you have an uptime monitor or, like a social media post planner or something.
There's so monitors, some endpoints or something. Yeah, like there's a lot of little kind of toy app. I'm air quoting toy, but like simple apps that do one thing. That's like, I would pay, $10 for this source code.
Yeah, why not?
Totally cool. Okay, we're getting low on time. I should get into our quick round questions. I could keep picking your brain all day, but let's do it more intentionally here.
Cool.
So starting off, what do you think the biggest misconception is people have about serverless or edge development?
I think that there aren't computers involved. There always are.
If you were starting Redwood SDK from scratch today, is there anything you'd change, or is Redwood SDK kind of the clean slate version?
I wouldn't change a thing. I am so surprised by what we've built. I don't know where it came from, but I'm really glad that it exists.
Oh, nice. What a beautiful answer.
Thank you.
What do you think the most underrated feature, or maybe like the most surprising feature for new Redwood SDK users is or will be?
So we give you control over every byte over the wire. So that means that you control the document, the actual HTML and head and body that gets sent to the browser. You can turn off client-side hydration, so you can turn off React, which means
Yeah.
you're just shipping HTML.
Mhm.
So if you have a blog or a marketing page, you can keep that in the same worker as your actual product, and people get the most efficient experience. The most surprising thing is if you ship to Cloudflare using Redwood SDK without trying, you will get a lighthouse score of 100, without a doubt. If you don't get like 90 or above, I would be surprised.
Wow. Wow. Cool. All right. I might have to try this after this call. I'm going to go and spin up a version of our marketing website. We'll see if it works. Cool. What's a feature you want to build into Redwood that you haven't had time for yet, or like it's kind of in the early planning stages?
So we have the ability to be really composable, which means that we can give you routes, components, functions, database migrations in a folder. So
Mm.
if you want an admin side, I can give you an add-on that enables that. If you want a forum, I can give you an add-on. If you want a blog post, I can give you an add-on.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I think this concept is in a lot of really good frameworks. Django has it, Rails has it. I haven't seen a JavaScript framework that has it. I want to just give you the source code to those things so you can modify them for your own needs, but it starts you off on a really good path. And
Nice. Yeah.
it plugs in without boilerplate.
That's cool. Is the code all available if you're using one of these like plugins, or is it like is it all modifiable, or are you kind of to act with whatever the plugin exposes?
So we think of it like Shad, where you literally get the code, but
Got
you're
it.
not just getting components; you're getting like services or functionality.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Mhm.
you can modify it all yourself. I think that's
Cool.
really important.
Yeah. Nice. Awesome. Yeah, that's cool to hear. I feel like that's always the trick on those. Like, I want to pull something just off the shelf and get everything, but it's like, oh, the way it does auth or something is very specific, and I can't integrate it with my service. I'm trying to kind of bolt this onto. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like
that.
in a package JSON, it's in a module, and then
Mhm.
you have to like run some kind of script to modify it specifically after installation or something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always a little rough. Is there anything else you kind of implore users to go check out, or where would you have them jump into Redwood if they want to get rolling?
So go to rwsdk.com,
Hmm.
and I implore you to star our repo.
Yeah.
I know that that's a vanity metric, but it really means a lot to us. And also Triad. So our trend line of our NPM installations can continue going upward. Those are really good signals for us that is going to help us continue down the path of building the best React framework out there.
Yeah, nice, nice, very, very well said. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and chatting with me, Peter. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Noel.
Yeah, have a good one.
Awesome.